Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, episode number 133. This is being recorded on Tuesday, October 15th, 2024 at 5:41 p.m. And as the sun starts to go down, the frost in the air starts to rise. Actually, when I was driving home from work, it was a little bit chilly out, but it still had a beautiful kind of sight to behold. The sun was really kind of poking through the trees, really lighting up the colors of the leaves. It was just a truly beautiful sight to behold. It was just like no amount of photography could truly capture it in that moment. But for sure, man, it was definitely starting to get a bit chilly out. I was driving out there, and I was like, "Oh, it's probably it's getting a little hot in the car. I'm sure I'll turn the window down, and be a-okay, good." And you turn it down for a little bit, and then it was like, "Oh my gosh, I got to turn that window back up, man." You really start to feel it. And even now, sitting here, I'm definitely starting to feel it a little bit. But got cold water, hot coffee. It balances everything out. Make sure that you're brushing your teeth, especially if you're having a lot of coffee. One of the liquids that'll really stain your teeth. You don't want it to be, yellow like the sun. You want it to be white like snow. It's really cool, man, to brush your teeth. You got to make sure you're on top of that. I forget myself sometimes, but really just get on top of it 2-3 times a day. It's always great. I think the preferred way is 3 times a day, or the preferred amount, but we all have different situations where we're able to, not able to, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind going forward to make sure that you're doing well and staying well. But anyways, man, here we are. We are in the Halloween season, as stated previously, so I hope you guys are keeping on top of your horror films, your horror literature. I'm sure, there's plenty of playlists out there that you can put on that have curated songs that are, just kind of like classic Halloween songs or classic songs to kind of get the mood right and the feeling right. It's really cool, man, It's sort of like, I think Halloween is one of those holidays where the build-up is almost actually bigger than the day itself, because the day itself, I mean, we still got to go to work or school. We still have to, go about. And, when you get to a certain age, you don't really trick-or-treat anymore. And I was thinking about other holidays like, Thanksgiving or Christmas, where there is that build-up, especially Christmas, there is that build-up. I mean, so much so. And then, but the day itself is like a whole kind of day. It's like an event. I love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas. Halloween's great too. I'm not quite as enamored with it. But it's just fun to kind of get in the spirit. Like I said, get recommendations from people, see people's lists of like their favorite kind of horror films or their favorite kind of horror novels. I really don't read fiction. I primarily read nonfiction, with exceptions. But it's just great to see people have these collections of stories, or perhaps you're catching up on Stephen King or one of these kind of famous authors who write kind of horror literature. I remember a little while ago I did listen to Joe Hill's book, Heart-Shaped Box, which was a pretty interesting setup. From what I can remember, it was about this guy who was like a former rock star, and he is interested in like these kind of occult items that he like bought online, and he bought this box that had this like there was something attached with it. I don't totally remember, but I remember it being pretty good for the most part. It kind of ironically sort of like some of Stephen King's stories themselves kind of starts to peter off a bit in the third act and in the ending. I haven't read any of Stephen King's novels, but at least from the films that I've seen, a lot of them have the issue of kind of trailing off in the ending, in the conclusion, unless you just have a really good filmmaker at the helm. When you get someone like Kubrick who can kind of just tie it all into a really kind of neat bow, which I don't know. I gotta ask if that ending is the same as it is in the book. I've never seen that miniseries that they did from the 1990s, I believe it was, that I've always heard is not very good, but I think it'd be interesting to kind of get some perspective, because when I watch The Shining, I don't even watch it as a Stephen King thing. I watch that as a Kubrick film because it's so meticulously filmed, it's so meticulously crafted. I mean, people have their own theories, and because Kubrick was so notoriously kind of secretive and very hush hush about a lot of meanings in his films and the way he did certain things and being very protective of his work. there's a lot there that I think lies more in Kubrick than it does King. And King famously has denounced the Kubrick film and said it wasn't a faithful adaptation. So, but it's interesting. It's another film that people will talk about this time of the year, and you look around. There's probably plenty of things, events near you that are having kind of Halloween events. Like I know around here on Halloween, they're showing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and down the street they're having a live kind of orchestra play over Frankenstein. So it's just great. You drive down the street, you see the beautiful leaves changing, the pumpkins on people's front porches. Man, it's a really excellent time of the year. We start getting into that kind of cozy mentality. And with the weather getting colder, staying inside, kind of huddling up under the blanket, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful time of the year. I have no favorite times of the year. I think every time of the year is a wonderful time, but especially because it's colder out. Maybe the roads start to get a little bit icy depending on where you live. Unless even if you're in a place like California or maybe a part of the world that doesn't get a lot of snow or any snow, I think still that mentality kind of reigns true. But it's all subjective, of course. It's just a really kind of wonderful time to reflect on what we have so far. And of course, you go to your bookstores, and they have probably plenty of horror books there. And you go to I would say video stores. They don't really have those anymore, unless maybe you have a specialty one near you or something like that. One that still rents out videos, and you know. But I guess in that case, probably streaming services. Although that's not as much fun. But it does have its double-edged sword. I'm not quite as nostalgic as maybe some others are for the video store era. I experienced the video store quite a bit actually, where it was a weekly thing. It was sometimes more than a weekly thing, but it has its benefits and its disadvantages. I'm far more fond of the local kind of video store that was here until about 2012, I think, that had just a wide range of cool kind of titles because it was a local place. So they had a bunch of just like cult titles, and I always remember they had a little like rack up front, and there was titles like Damnation Hill, or was it Damnation Alley or Damnation Hill, the one with the giant truck on the front. This was The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer, Silip, Daughters of Eve. I think Nightmare may have been on there, or actually no, Nightmares. Yes, Nightmares, the Australian film, was on there. So I always remember that cover. Actually, I watched that for the first time a month or two ago. What a cool film, man! I really like that film. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember back from over a decade now, and well, either way, just I remember seeing a lot of really cool DVDs. I remember seeing the like all the. Remember when Something Weird had all the red DVDs of the Herschel Gordon Lewis titles of like The Wizard of Gore and 10,000 Maniacs. And they're all in the snap cases, and then there was stuff like Snuff. They had like the Blue Underground DVD of Snuff that looked like the paper bag, and I remember they had a copy of Cannibal by Marion Dora. And it's funny, all these films I really didn't see until later. Because even the Herschel Gordon Lewis stuff, I don't think I really got into it until a little bit later. And because I got that Arrow box set, the big cereal box, which was just a really cool box set. I mean, the films, of course, are varying quality. Some are definitely stronger than others, and some are quite a bit of a chore to sit through. But just for context, just what Herschel Gordon Lewis was doing, I just find so fascinating. At that time, just really kind of cashing in on this new kind of era of horror films and drive-in films and all that. It's really cool, man. But anyways, I'm kind of trailing off here a little bit. I should tie it into. Actually, it is funny. I'm thinking about. Actually, let me get a sip of this coffee here. 1 second. I'm thinking about this past weekend. It's funny how the big horror film in the country, in the U.S. right now, is Terrifier 3. Damien Leone's Terrifier 3 comes in at #1 at the box office. Total feat to be had. I mean, I'll be upfront and say that the Terrifier movies really aren't for me. They're not my kind of movies. But I mean, Damien Leone, who took his kind of small short from All Hallows Eve, and I think he did that in 2004, I think. I think the anthology came out a little bit later, but to my knowledge, that short was in 2004. But anyways, does his first film, gets some attention. Terrifier 2 kind of blows up, and people talk about it. Then Terrifier 3 gets a wide mainstream release, and It's number one at the box office. It's totally inspirational, and I think that people who are working on, whether you want to be a filmmaker or a writer or a musician or a painter, just keep on going at it, man. Because I mean, success is not guaranteed. In fact, everything is going to be probably pushing against you not to succeed. But that's why you just got to keep on going. And I'm sure Damien Leone was probably making these films at the time. We're like, oh man, I can't do this. This is a pain. I'm not going to speak for the man to be inappropriate to, but I'm going to take a while, I guess, to say this probably wasn't an easy road for him to kind of get where he's at to be the number one movie in America, and that's really cool, man. Like I said, I mean, I saw the film. It wasn't for me. But a lot of my acquaintances were very high on it. They really enjoyed the film, and that's just cool, man. I think that's just really cool, and I wish them all the best. And it's just funny that the big Halloween film is actually a Christmas film, funnily enough, because it takes place during Christmas. So I was kind of curious why it didn't release in December, but because on this weekend, Smile 2. So I guess it's funny because we're not like there was like a period back in like the mid 2000s where they were like getting like horror films like in August, which was crazy. If you remember like the Dimension films, like Rob Zombie's Halloween was like an August release, and I mean there was like the Saw films coming out in October, and then the Paranormal Activity films kind of took over, and ironically actually the Now X kind of turned because now we had Saw X last year and Saw 11 next year in October, but it's just interesting as all. But anyways, I'm kind of trailing off there, but I want to make sure I drink this coffee before it gets cold. I don't want that. It is a little bit chilly in here, but on the flip side of horror, let's talk about what I love to talk about so much are documentaries. You guys know how much I love documentaries. I have no favorite genre of film. I love all kinds of films. I love action, comedy, horror, thriller, western, musical. I love them all. There's no kind of film I won't watch. But documentaries, man, are just you just get a good documentary. It like makes my week. I'm like, my gosh, man, what a wonderful time to be alive. You're always just discovering cool stuff. And this documentary, man, I thought was just one of my favorite things I've watched this year. A documentary that I don't really have any expectations kind of going into any film, but I was not expecting to be as engaged and as into it as I was. We're going to talk about this documentary from 2011, directed by Adam Cornelius. It's called Ecstasy of Order, the Tetris Masters. And by that title, you could probably already get a good idea of what it is about. So it's about these group of people who are the best. They're looking for, I forgot who the main guy was, I do apologize, but they're looking for the best Tetris player in the world, although they're all American, which was kind of funny, or at least for the most part. I think there were like one or two guys who weren't, but I was like, man, they should have done it in America. It's probably some guys overseas who were crazy. But anyways, we follow a bunch of these guys who are just amazing at Tetris, and the film talks about, it goes a little bit into, Tetris coming out, and it gets bundled with the Game Boy, and people, in this film, they're playing the Nintendo, the NES version of it, so they have different ways. It's like fascinating the way that these people kind of go about their tips for playing Tetris and all that. I had no idea that when you bring the bar down, when you bring the actual like block down faster, you actually get more points. So on top of having to get the most points, you're also like on a time crunch. You just have to kind of be like go go go, be totally locked in. And I just really love films about people who are really obsessed with something, and these guys are just, they're totally just into Tetris. Guys and girls. I mean, I say guys just kind of like passively. But yeah, and there's a couple ladies in the film here as well. They're really good at Tetris. Actually, never seen, but they're all amazing at Tetris. But I love documentaries like this. People who are just obsessive with their, not even just necessarily a competition like this, but there was a documentary that was really good that I liked. It was called like Man versus Snake, about this guy who was like trying to get the high score on, I forgot what game it was. It was like a lesser known arcade game, but it was so fascinating because in that documentary it was like the game itself, which was called Nibbler. It's like if you got to like a certain amount in that game, you could actually like take a break for like a couple hours and like leave the game running. It was like, so like they're at like this tournament, and like so they'll be like 8 hours in, and then they're like, okay, I have enough points, I can go sleep for 3 hours, and I'll be good. I won't lose anything. It's wild, man. It's a really cool documentary. It's very and of course, I mean, like the big one would be like King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, which they actually talk about in this. But there was that pinball one as well. I can't remember the name of it was. It was about this kid who was he just really wanted to become like a pinball like champion, and like because there's like they have like on the rafters they have like certain like names up there, and he wanted to get up there, and so it's like his trials and tribulations. He's like doing really well at one point, and then he goes his turn. Well, I don't want to give it all away, but I just love documentaries like this because I mean, everyone's played Tetris, easy to learn, hard to master. I'm that guy who's playing it slow, man. I'm not good at Tetris, but if I ain't bringing down the bars, man. I'm my hand-eye coordination is a little delayed in that front, but when you get a group of people like this, what was so cool about this is that everyone on the documentary like is a cool dude, man. I mean, and the ladies as well. I'm saying dude in terms of like just people, but like with King of Kong, you have like Steve Wiebe, or is it Wiebe or Webby? I'm not sure, but he's like basically the protagonist of the film. He's a family man, he's a teacher. He just really wants to get this high score. And then you have Billy Mitchell, who is more of the antagonist, who is very very showboaty. He's very kind of big, bombastic, and but this one, it's like everyone involved was cool, and like, there seemed like cool people, like people you want to like hang out with and stuff, and just kind of like play games with them. There was no one in this documentary who you're like, oh, this guy or girl seems like a jerk. They all seem they all like cool to talk about the different methods that they have, and kind of like bouncing ideas off each other, like, oh, you play it like this, I play it like this, and oh, it's cool if I try it like this, and what's cool is that there's this one guy in the movie. There's almost like you almost could have done a documentary about this guy, but and I don't want to give too much of it away because I think part of the fun is kind of the unraveling of the story. But you have this one guy, Thor Ackerland, who they talk about. When he was younger, he was in the Nintendo Championships and he won at Tetris. And they don't know what happened to him. They saw him on like a shopping network show like in the '90s promoting like I think it was like Excite Bike or Rad Racer or one of those games, and then. Without giving too much away, what I'll say is that he actually is in the documentary as well, and his story is so fascinating. He really is like just such a an interesting guy, and how he ends up getting roped into all this. It's a really kind of like cozy film, man, and I really mean that wholeheartedly because watching these people who are so passionate and are so loving of this game, and when they're hanging out at getting ready for like the championship, and they're just drinking cola and drinking beer and kind of hanging out and watching each other play and all that. Man, I'm watching this film. And for somebody like me who is like a casual kind of play, I mean, I'm not really. Let me put it. I don't play. I'm not a gamer at all. I mean, the only game I'll play right now is like, when like the new Doom comes out, I'll play that. But I mean, I've devoted my life to the cinema, man. We all have we all have things that are not just interests, but what we've devoted our life to. And I've devoted my life to the cinema, man. That will always be priority number one. If I go a couple days without reading or writing, that's what it is. I want to get back on top of that, man. If I go a couple days without watching a film, man, it's almost like withdrawal, man, and it just feels like, man, I'm like losing my mind, man. I'm like hardwired. I gotta, it's been with me for as long as I can remember. And these people have Tetris. I have films, man. And I'm not claiming to be like no expert or nothing, man. I'm definitely not that. I'm people who are like encyclopedias of film, or people who know everything about like Tetris and all that. That's great. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm just a fan. I'm just a diehard fan. And, you can, when I die, man, you can say a lot of things about me. He was a good guy, he was a bad guy, say whatever you want, man. I'm going to be dead, doesn't matter. But you can't say I didn't live for film. That's just completely untrue. And that's what I've devoted my life to. And I love that, man. I love that these people have such a rabid interest in this. And even when you get to the championship, because you've known these people for the most part, you've known these people for this film. And there's a couple people that aren't given as much screen time, but it is kind of tense the way you're watching. You're like, man, who is gonna win this championship? It's just just a total gem of a documentary, because there are just some that I watched that are kind of low budget and are just they're still good, but they're still like there's not really not much of a documentary here, or it's like this could be like a short, but nah, man, this is like an hour 20. What's the runtime on this? This is like an hour. Yeah, I'm sorry, an hour 33, And this was just so engaging of a documentary. I watched this on Tubi, and looking it up now, it's actually fully available on YouTube if you don't want to watch with commercials. But even if you're not a Tetris like guy, I mean, it's just such an engaging, cozy, enjoyable documentary. And one of my favorite things I've watched this year. I really wasn't expecting it, was expecting to like it as much as I did, and now I'm gonna sip of this coffee here. You probably make a drinking game out of every time I say you make a sip of this coffee here. I wouldn't recommend it though, because you might have liver failure, especially with what you're drinking. Or I should say, depending on what you're drinking. And of course, like I said before, in the documentary they talk about the King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, which, if you haven't seen that, that's just one of the strongest documentaries of recent memory. But I think everybody at least knows about it, about the Donkey Kong kind of world championship, or it's not world championship, it's getting the highest score in Donkey Kong, and it goes back and forth between this guy Steve Wiebe, who's a teacher, a family man, and Billy Mitchell, who's far more kind of narcissistic, more ego-driven, and the film, paints like kind of a kind of rivalry in a way. And it's interesting about that is because I don't really follow a lot of like gaming stuff at all. I don't really know much about that kind of stuff. I used to be like when I was in high school, I was really into like kind of like old video games, like retro games and stuff. But ultimately, my obsessiveness of film kind of knocked everything out of the way. But reading up on everything that happened after that documentary, it's almost like I would love to see a part two, because there's been so many updates, and especially with Billy Mitchell, who, I mean, Steve Wiebe's, I mean, from what I've looked up, he's laid pretty low. I was looking at some answers he did on around like a Reddit AMA, which was, it was nice. It was like 5 years ago or so. And I think he has like an Instagram. I don't know, but like Billy Mitchell, has had so many controversies, and it's been. And then Twin Galaxies were involved. They had their own controversy. So you could almost make I mean, there's a fan kind of follow up called The King of Con from 2012 that's on YouTube that I want to watch. That's like a fan thing, but I think it's like 75 minutes or so. But it's all just such a fascinating story. Again, these people who are obsessed with Donkey Kong, who want to get the high score, and they talk about the kill screen and kind of this rivalry going on, and some of the characters in that are just it's just it's almost like it plays out so well like a regular kind of fictitious film, but the fact that it's a documentary, it feels so great. And even same thing with Ecstasy of Order is that even when it goes to the end of the film, I would say like the very last scene in Ecstasy of Order is like, man, it's such a great way to end the documentary. I won't dare give it away because it's such a, man, once those credits come up, it's almost like a sigh of like relief, like wow, what a fantastic documentary. So, yeah, Ecstasy of Order, I watched that on Tubi, but that's on YouTube. The King of Kong, that DVD, I don't even know if that DVD is in print anymore. I remember it had the really great reversible art that was like the drawing somebody did. It was like the long line of the arcade with somebody, I think probably Steve Wiebe at the Donkey Kong machine. If you get a chance, go on Google and take a look at that picture. It's really terrific. But I'm really surprised that that hasn't got a Blu-ray yet, especially because I don't know what label it is on the OCN kind of distro label from Vinegar Syndrome, but there's that company that's been doing all those talking head kind of documentaries, which I haven't seen any of those, but I've heard are not very good. I don't want to dish them too, I don't want to be too negative on them. Actually, I won't say which one, but the director of one of them, I'm casual acquaintances with. I mean, I say very casual. I mean, very brief online, but very nice guy, very smart guy, very knowledgeable. So I haven't seen the documentary though, the one that he directed. So, and I just don't really, I'm not too terribly interested in some of those topics. I'm not really interested in some of those. But I'd love to see this get a re-release. I'd love to see new interviews with Steve Wiebe and Billy Mitchell. Somebody said online, I read a comment, they're doing, I don't know how true this is. This is one person online. This could be completely made up, but 9 months ago, there was a comment on one of the Reddit posts that was like, they've been filming Billy in his legal battles and stuff for a documentary. I don't know if that's true or not. That's one person online. I could be completely false, but I'd love to see a follow-up. And actually, the director had a really interesting career after that documentary, because I think that was actually his debut film, because that was 2006 or 7. It says 2007, but for some reason I thought it was 2006. But Seth Gordon, and he went on to do like mostly like a lot of just studio comedies. Um, he did so let me see here. He did, damn, these ads are like crazy. So I mean, Ix's debut feature, because he did this as his documentary, he did a couple shows before this, and he follows it up with Four Christmases with Vince Vaughn and Reese Witherspoon, and then he does like a lot of TV. He did like Horrible Bosses, Identity Thief, Baywatch. I think he did. No, never mind. I thought it was something else. And then more TV, like directed some episodes of like For All Mankind and The Night Agent and these kinds of shows. So very fascinating career. I don't know why he did one of the things for Freakonomics. I never saw a documentary, but I remember when it came out. Um, I yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but cool stuff, man. Yeah, if you haven't seen The King of Kong, I think most people probably have. But if you happen to not have, then it's really cool stuff, man. Even if you're not into like this kind of like gamer stuff, which I'm really not. I mean, it's not typically my bag. I still find these documentaries very fascinating. People who are obsessed with something or obsessed with this kind of attaining this goal or whatever it might be. But I'm sure there's probably tons and tons of documentaries about people who are not just video games, but just like obsessed with like something and winning, this competition. Like I mean, like the devil at your heels being one that's it's been really kind of it's been taken off YouTube. It's been reposted on the Internet Archive. I think it was back on YouTube, and there's still no Blu-ray of that. I thought Canadian International Pictures said they were going to put it out a couple years ago, but there's still nothing. It's still on VHS, but that's just like one of my favorite things to recommend to people. I heard about that from Brian Sauer years and years and years ago. He was so high on it, and just this great documentary about this guy Ken Carter who the documentary's from the mid '80s, but he like wants to. It's like this crazy like rocket powered car that he wants to drive over the Grand Canyon. It's one of my favorite like films. It's like, I mean, it's a documentary, but it's like, I mean, I've heard it in comparison to American Movie, and I don't totally agree with that. I mean, they both have eccentric kind of characters, but I think American Movie is far more of a character study. I mean, American Movie is hilarious. It's one of my favorite films, but I think there is a lot of sadness in American Movie, and there is a really good look at somebody at this point in their life somebody who didn't get who has devoted their craft to this, but didn't become the Damien Leone, didn't get the big kind of mainstream success, that they were just they're Mark Borchardt living in this blue collar town and is just trying to make these films and kind of a really kind of funny and uplifting, but then delusional and sad kind of character study. He's a complex person, but that's why the film works so well, because it's never laughing at these people. It's never mocking them. It's a look into their lives. These really kind of interesting, eccentric people, and the way it's done is so well. And The Devil at Your Heels doesn't have quite that, but it's a different kind of thing where it's just these funny kind of eccentric people, but Ken Carter obsessively working for this goal, knowing the risks and knowing the fatal risks of it. I mean, if anything goes bad, I mean, if the car blows up, you don't get over the post. I mean, it's like the cons far outweigh the pros. But knowing that, being fully aware of that, still committing yourself to this idea is incredibly inspirational. And when I say incredibly inspirational, I'm not saying it's inspirational in a way that you should just do something that's going to get you killed and just go with it. Obviously, you should have kind of your head on your shoulders and really kind of think about, is this really worth it? I think the film The Rider by Chloe Zhao really touches on that in a beautiful way, of a character who knows that whose passion is taken away from them, and if they go back to that, it will almost surely be fatal. And at what point do you have to kind of reevaluate your situation? But I'm just throwing out films, man. I went everything from Terrifier 3 to now ending on The Rider. So I'm gonna wrap this up here, man. I didn't mean to ramble as much as I did, but it's a beautiful night, man. It's a beautiful life. It's a beautiful time to be alive. Tell your loved ones that you love them. Be very happy of the people in your life. Be be very thankful for just simple things, the food on your, the food in your stomach, the water in your stomach, having lights, electricity, man, just being very thankful of our daily blessings and being just totally aware of it. It's just a really, really magical and special time to be alive, and we really don't want to take that for granted. As bad as things may seem, and as stressful as life may seem, and how it can knock you down, you just really got to go with the punches and wipe the dirt off your shoulders and just face it head on, man. But that's all I got, man. So thank you guys for listening. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. I already got the next film selected for the next Peephole Pictures, so that's gonna be a fun one to talk about, for sure. And that's all I got. Thank you. Until next time. Goodbye.